Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast, coming at you a little bit later than we planned because my Friday afternoon parting gift from work was some kind of traffic jam that would not end. My normal 15-minute commute took me an hour and 20 minutes.
Lucky you.
Lucky is not the way I would choose to describe it, but I made it, and I'm excited to talk some running backs and some NFL news. How's the rest of your week been, Dennis?
You know, I've had a pretty good week. Got through the week. Actually took the day off today. Go do some stuff with the family before they head back to school next week. Went and did a little bowling. Got to be honest, with this bad hand and wrist here, bowling ain't really my thing. People look at me and they're like, oh, he's a burly guy. And I'm like, hey, do you have any 4-pound bowling balls with holes big enough for my swelled up knuckles? And they're like, what are you talking about? I won the first game. Jackie won the second. Both my kids are terrible bowlers.
Hey, well, you know, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And so
that is right.
That worked out for you. Well, there is some news. The Brandon Ayuk trade saga continues. Seems like the Browns and Patriots have been ruled out. The report is there's a framework of a trade in place to send him to Pittsburgh, working on them, but the 49ers also trying to get an extension. It seemed like we were really close to a deal on Wednesday. We are now 2 days later, and every day they say they're really close to working out a decision. How do you feel about this situation?
You know, it kind of reminds me of my good friend Maxwell Smart. You know, missed it by that much. It's ongoing. You know, it seemed like what I saw was Ayuk for Pickens and a third and a fifth. I don't know if I'm Pittsburgh, why not just keep Pickens? I mean,
well, and the report out of Pittsburgh is they like Pickens and they want to give him a huge contract regardless of whether they get Ayuk or not. There are also reports if they don't get Ayuk that Juju Smith-Schuster is their second option. I feel like there is a big gulf between those two players in 2024.
Well, I mean, you know, when I decide I want to go out for dinner, I always look at my wife and I'm like, hey, would you like to go to Ruth's Chris Steakhouse or dumpster diving? Those are our two choices.
You know, all I have to say is we start our wide receiver rankings next Tuesday. Can they please get the trade done by Monday? Because, no, that wouldn't really factor in for me. But depending on the pieces involved, you know, if Pickens stays, you know, him and Ayuk in Pittsburgh and what it does to San Francisco, if he goes there, having to think about how he fits in you know, I would like to just know what I'm dealing with before I make my final adjustment of my rankings. This is too much to ask.
So the final adjustments are going to happen, you know, right before kickoff of opening night. So
yeah, true.
Roll with it. Just roll with it.
Someone that's having possibly worse luck than I am this week is the Minnesota Vikings. J.J. McCarthy tore his meniscus, and it really devolved from the reports of that injury. I think they came out Tuesday because we went on Monday, so it hadn't even broken then. we weren't sure how long he was going to be out. Would he miss a few weeks too? Then he probably missed the season. Well, let's wait and see if they keep him. They put him on IR today. Signed Matt Corral, so his season is officially done. They're also playing roulette with our heartstrings, pulling out the injury carts in camp. First on Tuesday, it was Tyrone Tracy. The cart goes out for him, and everybody assumes he's gone for the season. He just has an ankle injury, not that an ankle sprain is good for you, but not season ending. Same thing Wednesday with Jordan Addison. They had to roll the card out for him. They said it was a non-contact injury, which always usually means you blew your ACL or your Achilles. Comes back, mild ankle sprain, probably won't miss much time. But how are we feeling about the Vikings? Certainly seems like we're getting Sam Darnold for most, if not all, of the season. Hawkinson's still on PUP. Running back room, a work in progress. Addison banged up, has some off field. They did announce that his court appearance, I think, is in October, which could potentially, as fantasy players, something to keep an eye on, because if that gets adjudicated in the middle of the season, it's possible he gets some kind of a suspension toward the end. So how are you feeling about the Vikings?
So I don't know if you've heard about this courtroom maneuver called the continuation. I fully suspect that's what's going to happen as they roll up on the court date in season. They'll get a continuation to the off season. I think Addison's going to be fine. A mild ankle sprain. They'll keep him out of play for a few weeks. He should be back to start the season, maybe a week or two into the season. They don't have great depth behind them. Brandon Powell and Trent Sherfield, a couple of journeymen, really are there. And Tristan Jackson, that's their 4, 5, and 6 wide receivers.
Jalen Naylor has really been stepping up in the preseason.
Well, they got him. He's listed as a starter with Addison in the slot. So, the real issue comes
we're already counting
with Hawkinson out. Then you've got Josh Oliver and Johnny Munt at tight end. We may see a little more Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler on the field at the same time than we initially expected.
That's if Jones can stay on the field.
I would like to issue a heartfelt apology. As you know, I'm drafting several underdog slow drafts right now. And as we kind of got into them, right before the last preseason game, I decided I would draft some shares of J.J. McCarthy, and lo and behold, now we see what's happening. So, anyways, my apologies. I think it makes sense. I was actually looking up, so what does it mean? What are the types of meniscus injuries and what has to be done? And the big challenge with the meniscus is that there's part of it that there's just no blood flow to. And when you tear it, you just got to take it out. Yeah. And so, it can't be sewn up. It's not going to heal because there is no blood flow to heal anything. And so part of it, it's just there and then it's gone. So I don't know. Probably a smart move. This may not be honestly, this is a season that maybe you want to take a little pause with Justin Jefferson, not because he's not quarterback proof, but if the team is going to stink, and with Sam Darnold and Nick Mullins, it could, they may not rush TJ Hawkinson back. And if Jefferson gets dinged up, they may be uber cautious with him and hold him out for games, or, keep him out, not have him play, just because they don't want to risk getting him hurt if they're not going anywhere. So I know he's a competitor and he wants to play, but coaches make decisions all the time in the best interest of the team, not in the best interest of a player racking up stats.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll be tackling our wide receiver rankings next week. I'd be curious to see where we have them. And some IDP news: the Falcons making a trade to acquire Matthew Judon from the Patriots for a third-round pick, and then followed that up signing safety Justin Simmons. Those are a couple of good veteran stars, shaping up to be an actually decent Atlanta secondary. Gives them a pass rush boost. I was kind of in on Atlanta. I thought they had a decent enough roster to compete last year, and it didn't all work out for them. But with Cousins and Penix has looked good in preseason. Are you excited for the Falcons?
You know, the moves they're making on defense now are kind of exciting. They're building depth and they're working on taking care of the team. You know, with Raheem Morris, a defensive-minded coach, I think that there's some potential there that this team might be pretty good. Now, with the whole, have you seen those crazy ass posts about, hey, since Michael Penix is playing well, who could really use a veteran quarterback? Minnesota. I don't know that. Would Cousins fit in Minnesota? Sure. Would it make sense to turn the vehicle over to Michael Penix right now? Probably not. Let's stick to the plan. I think the Falcons will. They've put together a very good team. It's adding Judon, and you tell me, Simmons is a longtime Bronco. Has he got anything left in the tank?
Yeah, I mean, he was really good. Still a Pro Bowl player last year. They released him for money reasons. So, no, I think I like the Falcons, but we'll have to see if they can do it on the field. There's no way they're trading Cousins. He also would not go back to Minnesota. I think he asked out of there for a reason. It's an interesting situation. I really don't understand those two moves back to back, and they've tried to offer justifications that still don't make sense. So I think they've given themselves a problem that they didn't need, but we shall see. Diving into running backs, we did 50 to 26 on Monday. Today, we're basically doing running back ones and twos in our projected ranking. We're doing the top 25. So, Dennis, why don't you give us what would essentially be kind of that running back two group? Why don't you go 25 to 13?
All right. So, starting out at 25, I've got Tyjae Spears. I have Tony Pollard at 29. Pollard was RB14 last year in Dallas. Spears was RB34 for Tennessee behind Derrick Henry. I think Spears, I think it's going to be a pretty good split, pretty even split between Spears and Pollard. And I just think Spears is the younger, more explosive back and is going to get a little more opportunity to be the guy. It feels like it's probably a 55-45 would be the widest margin of split on the touches between the two. I just think Spears gets a few more touchdowns, they split the carries pretty evenly. 24, I got Javonte Williams. He seems to be coming on. He's lost a little bit of weight. I do think that Denver has okay depth as far as they've got bodies they're willing to play. I'm not sure any of them are as talented as Javonte Williams, but we've seen through what Williams going into his fourth year now. He just hasn't put it together, mostly because of injuries and then a couple coaching changes. It hasn't been a great situation for him. But I like the talent. I think he's viable in all three phases of the game, runs with power and explosiveness. So I've got Javonte Williams. The biggest issue, I think, is that Denver just might not be a very good team and hence may not just score a lot of points. And I think that could damage Williams.
They aren't. They are not.
23, I've got Najee Harris. Harrison Warren, much like I've got several running back pairs that I've grouped close together. Pollard and Spears, Harrison Warren. Moss and Chase Brown, Ford and Chubb. I got Harris at 23, Jaylen Warren at 20, or Harris at 23, Jaylen Warren at 26. Last year, Najee finished his RB 23 with Warren at 22. We can talk about Najee being ineffective at times, and he's a guy that gets more effective the more he carries the ball. He's not super efficient, but he is a capable pass catcher, pass blocker. I just like Najee Harris a little bit better than Jaylen Warren. I do think Warren will catch a few more passes, but I think Harris is going to get a little more goal line work. He's going to get some more opportunity to touch the ball. 22, I got DeAndre Swift of the Chicago Bears. Khalil Herbert has shown that he's good for 2 or 3 games, but he's not really a guy that's going to be a long-term threat. Roschon Johnson hasn't really shown us anything yet. DeAndre Swift has had some good long stretches. Unfortunately for him, he does play soft. That's really been the biggest knock on him. But I feel like he's clearly atop the depth chart in Chicago. They got a rookie quarterback and what appears to be a really, really good trio of wide receivers. So that should open up opportunities for him to run the ball. We know Swift is explosive. We know he can catch the ball. And he's clearly the most talented back on the Chicago Bears. Will that translate? I'm suspecting it'll translate into a low-end RB2. 21, I got James Conner. He finished his RB 18 last year. I'm a little nervous because I know they drafted Trey Benson out of Florida State. Benson looked good. He's got good size, good speed, very effective runner. But Conner is a 3-down back. The biggest knock on him is, can he stay healthy for 17 games? He's one of these guys that he'll miss some games, but he'll also play through some injuries that hamper his effectiveness. So that does present a little bit of a worry for me. But I like James Conner. I do think he's going to be the unquestioned RB1 in Arizona. But I think that both Benson and Michael Carter and even Emari Demercado will all get some run at different times to give him a break. And adding Marvin Harrison and Zay Jones to Trey McBride and Greg Dortch, they've got an effective passing game. We may see the first 4,000-yard season out of Kyler Murray if Kyler can stay healthy. Number 20, I got Ramondre Stevenson. Again, another one that worries me a little bit. He's got RB1 talent, but I think he's on an RB3 team. And so I'm kind of bridging the gap by putting him at an RB2. Good at catching the ball, good power, can run the ball very well. I just have some concerns about how effective New England is going to be overall on offense with Drake May and Jacoby Brissett. They don't have much of a passing game at all. That's going to, Kayshon Boutte looked kind of good against 3rd and 4th stringers. But again, he's playing against 3rd and 4th stringers. So, he was a highly regarded prospect going into college. And, he had some ups and downs, and it didn't translate into draft capital because of some off-field issues and some things at school. But he's clearly a talented receiver. Javon Baker seems to have developed the drops. Tyquan Thornton has never developed at all. Pop Douglas is a slot guy that can be productive. Will Brissett and Drake May be able to make that passing game produce enough to ease up the defense on Ramondre? We wait to see. At 19, I got Aaron Jones. I think he's still got a pretty high-level skill set, even at, what is he now, 29. But can he stay healthy? That's always going to be the question with him at this stage of his career. I don't think Ty Chandler is a real threat to him. I think Chandler
29 turns 30 in December.
I think Chandler will get an opportunity to get regular playing time in an effort to keep Jones healthy. But I do think that Jones is going to be the clear lead back there. And now with knowing we're not going to make the move to J.J. McCarthy at all this year, hopefully Sam Darnold can keep it together and have himself a career year.
Well, and Jones is on a 1-year deal, so he might be motivated.
He may. At number 18, I got Zamir White. White came on strong last year, and he played well enough that the Raiders decided we're not going to try to keep Josh Jacobs, and we're not really going to draft anybody. They've got Amir Abdullah. Seems like they got somebody else there that I can't remember.
Alexander Madison.
That's the guy.
But I don't think I'd be afraid of him after seeing what happened with Minnesota.
No, definitely not. So Zamir White was our RB9 over the last 4 games last year when he had to start for banged up Josh Jacobs. And they like what they see out of him, and they're going to give him a shot to be the guy. They didn't bring in somebody to replace him. Can he be that guy, or is it are we going to suffer from sample size? What's a good sample size delusion? We'll see, but he's going to get the shot there. And, their issue too is going to be how consistent can their quarterbacks be? Is it going to be Minshew? Is it going to be O'Donnell? We know who Devontae Adams is and what he can do. They drafted Brock Bowers. They've got Jacoby Myers. Trey Tucker has been a pleasant surprise. So maybe that opens up opportunities for the running game if the quarterbacks can play well enough. Number 17, I got Alvin Kamara. I'm just not ready to give up on Kamara yet. I think he's clearly the guy they want to build their offense around, him and Olave. Great pass catching back. Last couple years, he's carried the ball a lot more. He does have good size at 5'11" and 215. Can he stay healthy? That's going to be the real issue with him. 16, Rachaad White, another young back that's a great pass catching back, but inefficient running the ball. But they didn't really bring in any competition. I'm not overly concerned with Bucky Irvin and Chase Edmonds. I do have some concerns about losing Dave Canales and how that affects Baker Mayfield. But they still have Mike Evans. They still have Chris Godwin. And they brought in Liam Cohen, who worked with Sean McVay and Baker during the time Baker was in Los Angeles. At 15, I got Kenneth Walker. If he can catch even a few passes, if he gets 3 targets a game, let's say, and he converts 1.5 of them, I think he has a chance to really produce big numbers. He is so explosive running the ball. Ryan Grubb is their new offensive coordinator, come from that Washington passing scheme there where he had Michael Penix and Rome Odunze and a host of receivers. Let's see what he can do with this Seattle team with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, or JSN, and Noah Fant. Will that make it easy on that running game and the explosive Kenneth Walker? I think Walker has a good year. Number 14, I got Joe Mixon. I know he went to a situation that I really love. He was RB6 last year. I just feel like they're going to pass the ball a lot. CJ Stroud has shown himself to be really good in that aspect of the game. Singletary had an okay year last year running the ball. And while Mixon is better than Singletary and fits that scheme very, very well, I'm just going to he's getting a little bit older. I'm going to discount the performance a little bit. So I got Mixon at 14. 13, I've got Isaiah Pacheco. Just missing out on being an RB1. He finished his RB15 last year. I could be too low on him. We'll see what happens with that Kansas City offense. But it looks like, Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy are shaping up to be able to provide some relief in the passing game. Rice looked good last year. Seems to be lining up to have himself a very good year. I think that the fact that they addressed the running game by pretty much re-signing Clyde Edwards-Helaire tells you all you need to know about what they think about Isaiah Pacheco. They like him. They're going to keep him atop the depth chart.
You're not buying the Deneric Prince hype?
I think Prince is better than Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
We shall see. Okay, so I will say my running back 2 group represents a lot of players who I think have competition for touches, be that other running backs or the passing game, or the guys who I like as lead backs in maybe poor offenses or pass-heavy offenses. So 25 and 24 for me, I have Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. They were back-to-back in the running back rankings, low-end running back 2 last year. I think there's going to be something of a split. I think having Arthur Smith doesn't hurt those guys, but I'm not sure it gives them a massive lift. Pittsburgh was already kind of a run-first offense. They've worked on that line. Hopefully that is a little bit better. Maybe they'll be a little more efficient. See kind of what the passing check down game, have to see how all that impacts. 23, I have Tony Pollard. You mentioned that you have Spears, at 25, and you had Pollard lower. I have kind of the opposite. I have Pollard here at 23. I had Tyjae Spears down in the 30s, pretty close to where he finished last year. I think they will split. I'm also not as bullish on Tennessee offense as some, but I think Tony Pollard, it will be better for him going back to a situation where he doesn't have to be like the 3-down man all the time. And I think he's probably a little bit of a more explosive player. At 22, I have Raheem Mostert. He was running back 5 last year. He was pretty incredible. I think he's still going to be involved, but I think we're going to start to see the transition. So I have him a little bit lower in running back 2. I have his tag team partner in here as well. At 21, I have Zach Moss. This is another one where I think you had Moss a little bit lower because you're a little more bullish on Chase Brown, but you weren't incredibly bullish on either of them. I think Brown will be in the running back 3 category. I liked him, but I think Moss is going to end up being the lead. And there was quite a bit of volume available in the Cincinnati backfield last year. Mixon finished as running back 6, not because he was incredibly efficient, but because he got a lot of opportunities. And I think these guys are going to split. So I liked Moss as a running back 2 and kind of one of my sleepers. I have DeAndre Swift at running back 20. I think he leads a committee in Chicago, but we'll have some other people involved. But I think he's still going to be good, a lot like he was in Philly last year. I have Ken Walker at 19. I'm curious to see how the offense breaks down, what ends up being the touches. He's another one we don't know entirely what the split will be. I still like him better than Zach Charbonnet, but I like him in the RB2 range, and I think they have a lot of passing assets. I have Zamir White at running back 18, similar to you. I thought he was great in the small sample size we got last year. I don't love the Raiders offense, so that is probably the reason I have him in running back 2. I think he'll be very good. I'm not really afraid of Alexander Madison, like we mentioned. I have Kamara at running back 17. He's very steady. I think he's involved in all the phases. I'm not entirely sold the Saints offense is going to be great. Same thing for my number 16. I have Ramondre Stevenson. I like him as both a runner and a pass catcher. I think he is probably the best fantasy asset in the Patriots offense, but I'm not hugely bullish on the Patriots offense in general. At 15, I have Devon Achane. I think that hopefully we'll see him in a few more games, and I think he and Mostert will be a great tag team duo. I have him finishing higher. I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up even higher than that. Have to see if kind of his production and rate stays the same. We saw some really explosive games last year, and I definitely like the potential. Like you, I have Isaiah Pacheco up high end RB2. I have him at running back 14. I think he was 15 last year. I think he's going to get about the same workload, and I think their passing offense might be a little bit better, but I don't know that that diminishes Pacheco, and he does not have much in the way of competition. Then at 13, I have Joe Mixon. I like the fit, another pretty robust offense, but it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out. We do have a question before we dive into our running back one tier. Half PPR, 12 team, 2 keeper league. Picks second, 1 pick before him. He thinks Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson, or JJ would be an option at number 2. I would take one of the running backs. I am guessing you also would, Dennis, based on your trepidation about Justin Jefferson. I think he could still be a wide receiver 1, but I don't think he'll be the wide receiver 1 given what's happening in Minnesota.
Yeah, JJ feels more like a late first round pick to me. And so in a 2 keeper league, I'm curious who he's keeping if these were thrown back. I'd probably a
lot of keepers leagues have round penalties, so guys will take dumpster dive options they found that could be so that they can have their high picks, especially if you're near the top of the draft order.
It feels I'm taking CMC. If I'm only playing in a couple leagues, I'm going to go with CMC. I get that Bijan could very well move up and be the RB1. But right now, the RB1 is CMC. Bijan is probably RB2, at worst RB3. So if you said, well, I'm going to take Bijan over CMC because Bijan's 22 and CMC is 29 or 28, whatever it is, I'd be like, all right, I'm good with that. Take your guy. But I'm taking CMC over Bijan by a nose. But if I'm portfolio playing, if I've got more than 5 teams, I may take Bijan in this situation just to give myself different players. So it depends on how you're playing it, but I would rank them CMC, Bijan, Justin Jefferson.
Why don't you go ahead and give us your top 12?
All right. Did you finish out?
Yeah, my number 13 was Joe Mixon.
Oh. So I just wanted to, before we go ahead, I want to mention something about Isaiah Pacheco, because I was talking about Rashee Rice, and our guy David Gautieri on Twitter was talking about Rashee Rice. Rookie wide receivers with 75 receptions and 900 yards in the past decade. Odell Beckham, Michael Thomas, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, and Rashee Rice. So I almost feel like we know we should be really expecting Rice to move up and be that wide receiver 1-ish for Patrick Mahomes. He's paired with Patrick Mahomes. That may very well make things easier for Isaiah Pacheco going forward. But again, we have Pacheco at 14 and 13, so it isn't like we're crapping on him. So, all right, at number 12, I've got my scariest player of all. Devon Achane at 12. He was RB24 last year, played in 11 games. He scored 64% of his points in just 4 games. So we know he's super explosive, but he can also put up some duds, get banged up. I love what he brings to the table. But the reality is he's 5'8" and 190 pounds. And while Mike McDaniel is basically stocking his cupboard like a pantry with these smallish, super fast running backs so that when one goes down, he can just grab one out of the cupboard and slot him in there. At number 12, Devon Achane makes me a little bit nervous, but he's so explosive. You can't just – at some point you have to put aside the potential for injury because every player in the NFL has that potential, except my number 11. But I've got Achane at number 12, and it could be good. He could be RB 60. Number 11, I got Derrick Henry. The machine, 6'3", 250 pounds, just keeps hammering downhill, going to a run-centric offense with probably one of the best RPO quarterbacks to ever play the game. I think Henry will have a good year. Again, he's another older back, moving to a new situation, but I feel like he's going to take some of the rushing heat off of Lamar. We've seen Lamar be very efficient on low-volume passing. I don't expect the presence of Derrick Henry to all of a sudden make, Lamar Jackson a 40 pass attempt per game quarterback. Honestly, I don't know that it changes the offense much at all, other than Lamar just hands off the ball on the RPO more frequently than run it himself. At number 10, I got James Cook. Another one of these little guys, 5'11", 199, 195-pounder. But he produced last year. He was RB12 last year. I don't think they brought in much serious competition. I know they drafted Ray Davis, friend of the show, and he's a good, hard inside runner. Again, though, he's another guy, 5'8", 5'9", 205-pounder. He's also a decent pass catcher. And given that wide receiver core in Buffalo, James Cook should catch a lot of passes again this year. So I think he's going to be just fine. Number 9, I got Josh Jacobs. Green Bay essentially structured his contract so they can get out of it after this year if Marshawn Lloyd looks great. And they can afford to keep him around if Marshawn Lloyd just looks average. So Jacobs is honestly playing for a contract, even though he technically has, a 3-year deal or 4-year deal with Green Bay. So, and I like Jacobs. He's good in all facets of the game. I don't know why Las Vegas felt that they needed to replace him with Zamir White. I don't think White is the caliber back Josh Jacobs is. Number 8, I've got Kyren Williams. We know that Sean McVay is going to ride his back till he's broke. And unfortunately for Williams, he's a 5'10", 199-pounder, and he'll probably break. But until he does, he's going to get 70, 75% of the opportunities. I know they brought in Blake Corum with the hope of, easing the workload on Kyren Williams. And, we hear talk about using him in the passing game as a wide receiver, whatever. Sean McVay is going to do Sean McVay things, which is run this passing offense that force feeds the ball to 1 or 2 receivers, and the running offense that force feeds it to 1 running back. And right now, I think you ride Kyren Williams till you can't. Number 7, I've got Travis Etienne. Etienne, it was the tale of 2 seasons last year. First half of the season, he was extremely hot. Second half of the season, he was extremely not. He had a couple games at the very end of the year where he kind of popped back up. But they didn't really bring in any competition for him. It's D'Ernest Johnson, and it's Tank Bigsby, and it's Travis Etienne. They let Calvin Ridley go. They let Zay Jones go. So it's Christian Kirk, Travis Etienne, and Evan Ingram. And then we'll see where Brian Thomas Jr. and free agent Gabe Davis slot in there as far as touches. I think Etienne's going to get the bulk of the workload in Jacksonville. At RB7, I may be too low on him. RB6, I got Saquon Barkley. Goes to a great rushing offense. I think a lot of us believe that Barkley is going to help keep Jalen Hurts healthier by taking some of those hits that Hurts gets beaten with. Barkley's 225 pounder, 230 pounder, excellent athlete, very, very, very good running back. I think he's landed in a situation that's gonna allow him to potentially compete for the RB1 title this year. I like Barkley a lot. I do get nervous that the old saying, you can't make a tiger change its stripes. And so even though Jason Kelce retired, we still may see a ton of tush push at the goal line that vultures touchdowns from Barkley. We'll just have to wait and see. Number 5, I got Jahmyr Gibbs. Last year, Gibbs and I think Gibbs was RB10. I think Montgomery was RB17. I don't think they're going to be that close this year. I love me some David Montgomery, but I have him down at RB30. I think he's still going to be viable. He'll be a guy you can play in your flex consistently, but I don't think we're going to see the type of production out of him we did last year. I think it is full on Jahmyr Gibbs season in Detroit. Number 4, I got Jonathan Taylor. I almost feel like if I had to bet on somebody to be the RB1 this year that's not Christian McCaffrey, I think Taylor might be my guy. We've seen him have top-level seasons in the past. He missed some time last year because he was injured, had to spend a bunch of time with Gardner Minshew as his quarterback. I think if Anthony Richardson can stay healthy, they've got Michael Pittman Jr., Adonai Mitchell, and Josh Downs. And then I just think it opens up the opportunity for Jonathan Taylor to have a great year. Number 3, I got Bijan Robinson. I think we see 1, 2, and 3 here flip-flopped around a lot. I like Bijan. I just think that his offense has more weapons than the Jets, where I have Breece Hall at number 2. And neither one of them quite get the Christian McCaffrey volume, which is why I have McCaffrey at 1.
Yeah, so for me, at number 12, I have Rachaad White. I think there's still a lot of volume in the way that they run their team because he's catching passes as well. And I agree with you. I don't think there's a significant amount of competition. I think they've actually tried to work on their line a little bit, see if that helps. I have Josh Jacobs at 11. I like him to bounce back, to be something closer to the back that we saw in 2022, or even the back that he was before he got injured and knocked out last year. He, trucking along running back 1 level. I have Travis Etienne at running back 10. He was probably a little more consistent last year than we want to give him credit for. Their entire team took something of a dive a little bit as a team the back half of the season, because they were 8-3 and they finished 9-8. So that was not sprinting to the end line. But they like him. They picked up his 5th-year option, which we've seen is increasingly rare for running backs. I think that's a big vote of confidence. I have James Cook at 9. I really liked what he did, and to think really that happened, a bulk of that took over kind of around the midpoints in the season where they shifted their offensive style a little bit. We have talked at length about Buffalo shipping out their top-end receivers and not really replacing that wide receiver room with any stone cold locks. I think they like what they found down the stretch, and I think that benefits Cook and potentially Dalton Kincaid. I have Kyren Williams at 8. Like you, he was number 2 in a points per game basis. Last year was the only other running back that averaged more than 20 points per game when he was out there. Maybe some injury risk, but I like the way he's used, and we've seen them, in a Rams system, really use a running back as a workhorse and put up some incredible fantasy numbers. I mean, Todd Gurley's career may have burned out quickly, but he was a beast playing in that offense for a couple of years. I have Derrick Henry at 7. He was running back 8 last year, and he's going to a team that gave 13 rushing touchdowns to Gus Edwards last year. I think this is a match of a player's skills with an offensive scheme that I think will be pretty winning. I think he stays in there. And then I have the same players in my top 6 as you. Slightly different order. I have Gibbs at 6, Barkley at 5, then Bijan at 4, Jonathan Taylor at 3. I agree with you that we've seen him do it before. In 2021, he was the RB1 because he was averaging a McCaffrey like 22 something points a game. I have Breece Hall at 2. He was running back 2 last year with sort of a garbage offense around him. Could be a beneficiary of having a little bit of a better offense. You might have more open running lanes too if Aaron Rodgers is throwing the ball to Garrett Wilson and it's not Zach Wilson or one of the parade of also Rans they had back there kind of throwing the ball into the ground. And I have McCaffrey at 1. Scheme, everything. He's a player that actually might even get a boost if Brandon Ayuk gets traded. If that's even possible. He was just so dominant. I think the only thing that worries me about him is the potential for injury, but you could pretty much say that for any of the big backs. I think all of the guys that we have in our top 12 for the most part have missed time. I know in my top 7 from Derrick Henry up, guys that have missed huge chunks of seasons or whole seasons, but have been incredibly productive when they've been in there. So that is my group. Before we get out of here, I thought I would ask you a couple of questions. Who is one player that you didn't put in your top 25 that you think has the best bet if things break right to vault into your top 25?
I think Devin Singletary, who I had at 31, it's not a huge reach, but it just feels like they don't have a ton of stuff behind him. I feel like Eric Gray has looked okay to pretty good in training camp. Dynasty people love Tyrone Tracy. He's like the dynasty darling there. They did just sign some never was free agent last week when Tracy got dinged up. But I feel like Singletary, you talk about it on the HBO show, the Giants wanted him. He was their target. And he's familiar with the offense. The biggest issue I have with Singletary is that he's 5'7" and 203 probably, and if he had Devon Achane kind of speed, it might be a little bit different. He's a little bit of a grinder for somebody that small, but he knows what he's doing out there in that offense, and I think he's going to get the opportunity.
Yeah, and it's not a bad call. I mentioned this before, but in 2021, which was the last year that Brian Daboll was his offensive coordinator for the Bills, Devin Singletary was right there, running back 18. And he was still splitting time there, so definitely not a bad call. The one I'm going to go with is Jonathan Brooks. I think if he's healthier than we realize and he takes over as a workhorse back in Carolina in the first 4 games, I would not be shocked. Chuba Hubbard was running back 27 last year. It's not a big stretch to think somebody who is a little bit more of a talented back. We obviously saw Dave Canales was the offensive coordinator, even behind a middling offensive line in Tampa Bay, able to give enough volume to Rachaad White to vault him into the top 12. So it's not a huge stretch for me to believe that Brooks could make it in there. I have him lower based on the idea he's going to be more of a slow build coming off of that injury. But, if I'm wrong about that, he vaults up for me. What is a player in this top 25 group that you're most nervous about?
I mentioned it earlier. It was Devon Achane, just because we've seen how wild the swing in scoring can be for him. And we've seen him get injured. We've seen him rush back from injury and then miss time again. Just makes me nervous that, he could play. He could literally play 12 or 14 games and be a top 10 running back, or he could play 12 games and score double digits in 6 of them and, be what causes you to lose. The next one that makes me nervous, though, after that is McCaffrey. Just, he's getting up there in age. He had over 400 touches last year. It seems like we've seen so many players when they have that super high volume, the following year they just drop off and they just can't quite get back. It takes so much out of you. He's had some heavy workloads. He's an elite back, and until he breaks, you got to ride him. But we have seen him miss 12 games or 10 games in back-to-back years not so long ago. So McCaffrey as RB1 makes me nervous as well.
I think the one I'm going to go with is, the Rams were a really fun story last year, and they gave us 2 explosive fantasy players that were drafted in the 5th round, one of which is at this position, and that is Kyren Williams. I like the potential. I liked everything we saw. He was going great guns, got injured, missed a few games, came back out, and just picked up right the same workload, which should make you feel better. But
missing those 4 games is
5th round pick. It's one season. They definitely, you can't say that they aren't a team that added a significant piece of competition, because Blake Corum was definitely a higher draft, more high profile. You say 3rd round's not that high. Well, in the modern draft, running backs I don't think we had a single running back go. Maybe one went at the end of the 2nd round. I guess the Brooks went in the 2nd round, but going in the 3rd round isn't really a detriment, in terms of draft capital, and that would give him higher draft capital. That's probably the one that feels the most volatile. It feels like you've got to put him in there because of what we saw, but also you can't feel lead pipe cinch about it.
Right.
So, who is one player that you think, if things break right, could vault into the top 12?
I'll give you a couple that I really like. I've got Walker at 15 and Rachaad White at 16. And I just feel like both of them could get enough volume. And if they stay healthy, it could push them up. Walker, because I think he's legit got a 1,500-yard season in him because of his on-the-ground explosiveness. And we've seen it with Rachaad White. He's probably got a 75 to 90 catch season with regularity in him, because that's the part of the game that he's the best at. And in PPR, that's gold.
I'm going to go way off the board and say my pick is Chase Brown. Cincinnati has had enough volume in that running back position to have an RB1 the last couple of years. I lean toward Moss, but what if, Moss is another player we've seen get injured or get knocked out. We've heard nothing but glowing reports about Brown. My trepidation about him is the smallest of small sample sizes from last year. But we've already seen one back get knocked out, and Chris Evans get knocked out of that Cincinnati backfield. They're not particularly deep. If something happened and Chase Brown got a significant volume, I still think, whatever is in that Cincinnati backfield can give you RB2, or could even, if it all went to one guy, Mixon was RB6 last year. I don't think there was any point in time where I sat there and thought this guy is top half of the top half of RB1 during the year, but you look at how it all shook out and how reliable it was. And their offense probably wasn't even as efficient last year as we think they could be if Burrow is back and healthy and Chase and Higgins are going on the outside again this year. So that's my maybe way off the board.
Well, if I'm going to go way off the board like that, I like your pick of Chase Brown, but if I'm going way off, I'm probably going to go Gus Edwards, because it just feels like I love J.K. Dobbins, but first year back coming off of an Achilles, Kimani Vidal then is the next guy up, and Isaiah Spiller. It just doesn't feel like there's anybody there. If he does it, it's going to be touchdowns and rushing yardage. I don't think Edwards will catch a ton of passes, but I've got him down at RB 39. I could see him just based on volume getting up there, putting up 1,400 or 1,500 yards and double-digit touchdowns. And if he catches 25 passes.
That was I was trying to think, because last year Kyron Williams and even to some extent Rachaad White came from way back. None of us were touting them as a top 25 guy, and then they flung into those running back one. A little Freudian there. We are that'll do it for us today. We are moving on to wide receivers next week. We will start 50 to 26 on Tuesday, top 25 next Friday as we're moving in. Then the week after, we will end with our top 25 tight ends, and then we will do our final redraft mock, all leading into the live draft episode that we will do on Sunday, September 1st, which should be a lot of fun. Dennis, there is shockingly, I do not understand this preseason layout for the NFL. One of the glories of preseason is you have a handful of games every day, Thursday through Monday. There is literally no preseason games today, and there's like 15 tomorrow, which we get that during the season. I don't know how I explained to my wife on a random Saturday in August that I'm going to watch 4 flights of games for 16 hours. Don't talk to me. But I guess that's the way it goes. So if people are like me and they're hurting tonight and they're trying to get it all in, what can they do to fill that football void?
Well, we know you're prepping for your draft, so go to the Fantasy Football Roundtable on your favorite podcast platform. Hit that like and subscribe button. Download those shows. Listen to our team previews. Listen to our ranking shows. Go out, do those drafts.
Should be fun. Well, we will see you guys next week as we turn the page to wide receivers. And again, one final plea, San Francisco, sign them, trade them. You have until Monday afternoon to get it done.